Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. It's time to start our conference. My name is Justyna Szczulik. I'm Deputy Head of Research at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. And I'm dealing with China, so I'm very interested in a global gateway, as the global gateway is assumed to be some kind of an instrument as a response to the Belt and Road Initiative. So first of all, welcome all of you to the Polish Institute of International Affairs. To discuss the implementation of the Global Gateway strategy. The strategy was announced 2.5 years ago, so I think there's a good momentum, good moment just really to have a look where we are, what are the success stories, or what kind of challenges we are facing. And as I already mentioned, that it is widely believed that the Global Gateway is a kind of EU's response to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Is a kind of a tool to enhance the EU's or Western presence or cooperation with the third countries, mostly with the so-called Global South. And I know that probably many of you do not like this kind of notion, Global South, because what is Global South? But for the sake of the discussion, let me use this notion. And since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the fact that China and Russia cooperate with each other, that China gives Russia a lifeline, and that the Chinese and Russian narratives are pretty well accepted or received in the, let's say, Global South or developing countries, I think it is there is a need that the West should enhance its presence in those countries to win hearts and minds. So, and I think that the Global Gateway is a very good instrument and a good tool to do that. And before I pass the floor to Director Jaczewska, let me just few sentences about China's perception of the Global Gateway, because before the conference, it decided to have a look what China thinks about the Global Gateway. And I would like to focus on 3 points. The first one is that for China, it's obvious that is a EU's instrument to focus on developing countries, on African countries, Latin American countries, and Southeast Asian countries. It's pretty obvious when you look at what Chinese are talking about, the Global Gateway. And officially, of course, China says it's great that we have a Global Gateway because it's great to have another instrument to enhance relations with those countries because they need some assistance, support, and so on and so forth. So it is a, let's say, official stance, but unofficial, I would say, given by the Chinese experts, is, wow, it's great that we have this global gateway because it means that the Belt and Road Initiative works. So we are doing a good job. So to some extent, EU is envious. So decided to set up the Global Gateway Initiative. So this is, I would like to give you just to describe how China perceives this instrument. And frankly speaking, attending various conferences last year, especially when the Global Gateway was raised, so there were many laments that it does not work. So I would like to sit here, listen to you, and to know what is going on with the Global Gateway. So now I pass the floor to Director Beata Jaczewska, who is Director of the Economic Cooperation Department at the Polish MFA.
Good morning, Sylvie. Good morning. It is a real pleasure, as always, to be here at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. The best discussions are here, and the best criticism that the MFA may get. So I'm really much counting on it today as well. We have fantastic guests for today's discussion, and starting with Director Luc Bakou from the European Commission, from Directorate General responsible for international partnerships, who knows Global Gateway the best and straight from the heart of Brussels. And I'm super happy to have Dominik Kopiński from the Polish Institute of Economy and Karol Tofil from the Polish Development Bank. Great thanks to Elżbieta Kaca and Jolanta Szymańska from the Institute here for organizing and helping us to facilitate this discussion. Let me just reiterate a bit to whatever was said at the beginning. This is not purely economic strategy. So do not think that me being here as the Director of Economic Cooperation from the Polish MFA, I'm having this economic perception of the Global Gateway Initiative. It is definitely much more geopolitical, and it is definitely much more about the European Union's presence in the world. And this is how we should think about it, and this is how we should think of the potential benefits that not only Poland, but Poland in the group of 27 member states may have out of it at the end. So I'm really curious myself. I would be running out, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm having lots of spice. My colleagues are sitting here, and they'll be taking notes. So I'm really interested in the outcomes of this debate, and I keep my fingers crossed for the new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome again, everyone, at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. My name is Jolanta Szymańska. I'm the head of European Union program at the Polish Institute of International Affairs, and I will have a pleasure to moderate today's discussions with our distinguished guest. I guess because Director Jarczewska already introduced our guest, I don't have to do it again, but I want to welcome our guests here. And because our discussion will last only 1 hour and 20 minutes, I think I will go directly to our questions. My plan for this event is to have like 2 rounds of my questions to our panelists, and later on a Q&A session, so the time for discussion with our audience. And I can see we have a lot of experts and analysts here on also EU and global gateway strategy. So I think we will have a fruitful discussion after the main part of this session. So as I mentioned, I go directly to my questions, and of course I would like to start with Mr. Luc Bagour. And as Director mentioned, you are the best expert on global gateway strategy. So at the beginning, I would like to ask you about your general evaluation of the global gateway implementation in terms of fulfilling the goals of this strategy. In particular, how the strategy contributed to strengthening the EU positive offer towards partners in various regions. To what extent has the strategy contributed to boosting the EU competitiveness, the diversification of its value chains, and reducing strategic dependencies? What is your general view on the strategy and the implementation of the strategy?
So good morning, and thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. We will touch upon several aspects of our global gateway strategy, I think. And to answer your question, I will need maybe first to briefly refer to the context in which global gateway was born and the change in mindset it brings. In the last 5 years, we have experienced a global pandemic, the acceleration of the climate change issues, a multiplication of military coups, and even a war returning to the European soil. And sometimes reality can be stronger than fiction. And we could not disregard that hard times call for drastic solutions. And the global outlook dictated, in fact, a paradigm shift for the European Union. We had to bring together our values and the new geopolitical reality in our relations with the partner countries. And the Global Gateway Investment Strategy is at the heart of this shift toward international partnerships. I will not come back to the structure of Global Gateway and the objectives. But what is important is that we are looking for win-win projects that contribute to both the European Union's and partner countries' strategic interest. And let me quote the President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, said, "We want to create links, not dependencies. We want to show that democracies and value-driven investments can deliver." And this strategy has matured since the launch of the strategy in 2021. And indeed, as already said, it's time to take stock. And I think that we can be proud of what we have done so far. We have to do more, but we can be proud. First, we have a list of more than 200 flagship projects, transformational, large-scale ones that duly showcase what we can do under Global Gateway. And thanks to this, we are advancing the Agenda 2030, we are advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, and building a closer relation across the world. We have enhanced our communication efforts in partner countries with regional campaigns taking place, such as branding campaigns targeting youth audience in South America. And the Global Gateway Forum that took place in October last year raised our profile, attracting some 20 heads of state and government and more than 70 ministers. So let me turn to some examples of concrete projects that will better illustrate what, in a way, may sound theoretical. So a prime example of the rollout of Global Gateway and its importance for the European Union's economic security and competitiveness is our action on critical raw materials that are embedded in the European Union Critical Raw Material Act. We have already signed 13 critical raw material partnerships with a number of countries around the world that are resource-rich. In the developing world, to name a few, Namibia, Rwanda, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Zambia, Argentina. And we are now implementing these partnerships with concrete roadmaps for investment projects on the ground. And they are covered the full raw materials value chain from exploration to recycling. And another example of how Global Gateway fosters the European Union competitiveness in emerging net zero industries is our investment in renewable energy. And in this context, renewable hydrogen is part of the answer to the triple challenge of energy security, energy transition, and access to affordable energy. So by our Team Europe efforts to work together on making renewable hydrogen a reality, we are increasing at the same time the competitiveness of Europe and enabling the green transition in Europe. And we have already a number of roadmaps for producing renewable energy and green hydrogen in Kenya, in Namibia, in Kazakhstan, and we are implementing renewable hydrogen strategies with Morocco and Egypt. And in doing so, we are not only investing in hard infrastructure. We have a 360-degree approach, combining hard infrastructure and the creation of an enabling environment that is conducive for investment. When we are supporting the African Union in its big endeavor to produce 60% of the vaccine in Africa by 2040, We strengthen the local pharmaceutical systems and the manufacturing capacity, of course, but we look at both the supply and the demand sides. Of course, there is a lot, again, there is a lot to do. We need to become even more geostrategic to bring more impact and leverage our resources. We need to further enhance our visibility, especially in view of continuous disinformation, we have to say the word, by other actors in the world. And we need to work better together. And this is maybe the most important there. We have to work better together at the level of each individual member state with the creation of national teams that bring together the public and the private sector and strongly involving, of course, civil society. We need also work better at European level, forging Team Europe capacity. However, the examples I've brought to the table, let's say, show our potential, and that I think we are now on track.
Great, thank you very much. We will continue, of course, in the second round, but now I want to give the floor to Dominik Kopiński, and from the Polish Economic Institute. And as you are an expert on Africa, I would like to ask you about Africa. As the biggest share of global gateway financing is directed to Africa, has the strategy been a big change in the EU cooperation with African partners? How African countries perceive this initiative? What are their awaitings, and to what extent the strategy has managed to reconcile the EU geostrategic and international partnerships development goals in Africa?
Thank you, Jolanta. As you rightly said, Global Gateway is really Africa-oriented initiative. Just to give you a context, the EU intends to invest around 150 billion euro in Africa between 2021 and 2027 as a part of a global gateway to address mostly infrastructure deficit in Africa. And that is half of 300 billion euro earmarked for the entire world. Now, is it a lot? I don't know. Really, it depends. There are some estimates showing that Africa needs around $60 to $100 billion annually to close the infrastructure gap on the continent. But it's a significant amount, that's for sure. And apart from the major, this financial aspect, I think it's also worthwhile to notice that Global Gateway is driving EU soft power in the region. Also is a major drive of the EU in terms of winning hearts and minds of African countries and societies. I'm not sure how many of you have noticed that before we would frame it, the partnership between EU and Africa as EU-Africa partnership. Now we call it Africa-EU partnership. I think that's kind of a narrative that also signals the shift and demonstrates that the EU wants to generally build a partnership of equals, or at least want to be perceived as a partner in Africa. But this is not going to be easy task, as the EU reputation in Africa. I'm just basing my intervention on some critics in the region. The EU reputation in Africa has been marked by decades of patronizing and lecturing African governments in terms of governance, corruption, pace of democratization, and so on. So in that sense, this is a desirable and long overdue initiative to fix this image or to change the perception of EU in Africa. Because, European Union is taken for granted in Africa. but African region should be reminded that this is the biggest donor, the biggest investor, and the trade exchange between EU and Africa is bigger than with China, which sometimes is ignored. Now, Africa, of course, is not a country. This is a continent comprising of 54 countries, so we'll see probably some deeper engagement in some of the places like North Africa, which due to geographical proximity matters a little bit more and so it draws different attention from the European Union. But it's also a dramatic shift in terms of reconceptualization of idea of development aid. The EU and the West, for that matter, has never been really interested in boosting hardware of physical infrastructure and mostly invested in software parts of the economy, such as governance. So to quote Bob Dylan, times are changing really. Now there are some misconceptions I want to address also regarding the global gateway. Firstly, most of the money will come from the private sector. So this is not going to be public money. And the EU will be trying to secure funds through investment guarantees. So this is basically de-risking the investment coming from the private sector, but also providing some blending operations. So in other words, it is going to be more like crowding in private investment, which is a different attitude and approach compared to, say, China, which we're going to be discussing later. So the critics claim that if we frame it that way, this is not really new money involved, but just repackaging certain things that the EU has been using before, plus the private investment, which is not something that we should be taking for granted, because the perception of private sector of Africa is something that we shouldn't be really again taking for granted, because the risks involved, political risk, business climate is not really conducive in many African places. So we cannot really say now that the private sector is going to be really enthusiastic about going to Africa to the magnitude that we want. There are some, of course, concerns here, because this is also what your question was trying to steer my intervention towards. Because of the focus on natural resources or critical raw materials, some African countries are suspicious that it's going to be kind of old wine in new bottles, and the global gateway is going to be just a new scramble for African resources. And the expectations are on the African part that it's going to be different at that time, that these funds will help Africa leverage its industrialization ambitions, build infrastructure and upgrade the economies, also increase the capacity of the refining sector and processing capabilities in the region. So Europe is not going to be treating Africa as an extraction backyard as it used to be the case in the past. So it is really important for the EU to deliver on these expectations, although it's not going to be really easy, as these ambitions of African countries are hampered by a myriad of different structural problems, such as patchy access to energy, water, governance, and so on and so forth. And lastly, the concern that I want to mention is that the EU, since this is an initiative which is a positive initiative based on values and principles, the EU will have to reconcile its moral stance, which is quite rigid, and that is good, of course, with partnering with some authoritarian regimes and flawed democracies on the continent, and there are plenty of such regimes in Africa. And it happens that those countries sometimes are very resource abundant, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo and its cobalt reserves, which are critical for the world and for the European Union. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. So let's jump from Africa to our closer neighborhood. And as Elżbieta Kaca is our expert on Eastern neighborhood, I want to ask about your assessment of Global Gateway implementation in the close EU neighborhood, not only in the Eastern neighborhood, but also in Western Balkans. What are the main challenges in this region with the implementation?
Sure. First of all, I would like to highlight that generally the launch of Global Gateway was a very positive development in EU external affairs. However, we cannot yet say it is a success story. Why? Because, I mean, still the projects are at a very early stage of implementation. I mean, we have like the European Commission have selected more than 200 flagship projects. Some projects are ongoing. Some other projects are ongoing. If you see, for instance, the European Investment Bank work, I mean, sometimes the preparation of the projects in the field of infrastructure took a very lengthy process, and now the European Commission is going to pick up new flagship projects for the coming 2 years. So still we can have some preliminary observations. I haven't seen yet an audit. I'm not sure if it's going to happen soon. Anyhow, I think that Global Gateway is a nice try to give more strategic flavor to investment worldwide. The usual criticism done by think tanks, it's just that this is the old wine in new bottle, that is repackaging of already existing EU financial schemes under new mark. But at the end of the day, there are some few novelties which were brought by Global Gateway. I think that it extended. Generally, it was based by the Europe-Asia connectivity strategy from 2018, but Global Gateway extended the geographic scope of EU action in the field of investment worldwide. It extended the material scope to the field of health. Definitely, Global Gateway positioned higher the EU investments worldwide in the hierarchy of priorities, because it was really a clear priority of von der Leyen guidance, to promote this initiative. And what is important, there are new, as far as I understand, there are new criteria to select the projects and taking into account the geopolitical value of the projects. The issue is that the guidance are done by Global Gateway board were done like 1.5 years. So still, this is the process in the making. So it will be to assess in coming several years to what extent the flagship initiatives has fulfilled the goals of the strategy. If it comes to the region which I know the most, the Eastern Partnership region, but also to some extent Western Balkans, my assessment is totally different to African region. In the closest EU neighborhood, the Global Gateway was welcomed. I mean, the partners awaited the increased investments on the EU side. And what is important, if it comes to the EU neighborhood, we have like separate EU economic and investment plans, separate for Eastern Partnership region, for Western Balkans, and for Southern neighborhood. Altogether, they should bring investment investments of about 77 billion of euros. And as far as I see the data, I know the data from the Eastern Partnership region, the European Commission and European investment banks are on a very good way to reach a target. In case of Eastern Partnership, it should be 17 billion of investments till 2027, and till now, the economic and investment plan brought about 9 billion of investments. So I think usually if it comes to the closest EU neighborhood and Western Balkan region, those countries are relatively good in terms of absorption capacities compared to other regions. Anyhow, if it comes to the challenges, obviously I mentioned that the partners are relatively good in absorption, but usually, the difficulties lie in national administration of partner countries' absorption capacities, because to have EU-financed infrastructure projects on place, you really need to have a good administration capacities to deliver. And for instance, we see in Eastern Partnership region that this is still a gap where we could work more. Then obviously, usually, if it comes to EU partners, the questions arise around transparency and anti-corruption measures and judiciary reforms, which are prerequisite to have more investments. Then obviously the problem is of the scale of investment. The EU will never arrive at a situation that it will fill the gap, obviously, but definitely if it comes to the areas such as transport, on environment, the level of investments is relatively low compared to the needs of the countries. For instance, in EAP region, the ambition was to have finance the construction of 3,000 of kilometers of roads and railway. But then if you see the very, very poor infrastructure in this region, I mean, it's a drop in the ocean. And then obviously a security environment is usually a problem, because in countries with the conflicts, you cannot go on with the infrastructure projects. We have an example of Ukraine when, discussions about extending TNT, it's quite difficult to build roads in some regions of Ukraine where they will be, diminished. There is a risk of diminishing. And the last point is about the EU strategic choice in terms of selection of projects. It seems that in this selection, in this last selection process of selecting those 200 flagship projects, there are only several projects which are of strategic values, like very comprehensive one, like the projects on vaccines in Africa or on raw materials. But there is a feeling that the projects are quite dispersed. So the think tank criticism is focusing on this issue, that maybe in the next round of selection of the process, the EU should go for choosing more complex and more strategic projects to greater extent. It is a difficult process as I see, because in the selection of process you have many different DGs of the European Commission, different 27 member states, the financial institutions, and to have a consensus, I imagine it's quite difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. And I would like to stay for a moment still in the eastern neighborhood and ask Karol Tofil from the BGK about potential of investments in not only Ukraine but also Eastern Partnership countries. Based on the your bank actually experienced with Ukrainian recovery, reconstruction. I know that you don't like and you don't use rather this word, reconstruction, but still I know that you actually manage a lot of project focus on Ukraine. And having this in mind, can you share your prognosis, also your expectations when it comes to the implementing investments of a global gateway strategy in this region?
Good afternoon already. It's after 12, so good afternoon to everyone and thanks for the invitation. Indeed, BGK is trying to be active abroad, and I would say we're not engaged in many projects in Ukraine, but we are trying to do, I would call that we are doing the baby steps to learn how to do and how to implement projects which have a clear development impact for our eastern neighborhood, and as well the neighborhood or the areas which are the priorities for the Polish government and the Polish authorities. And indeed we are working closely with DG NIR and DG INPA in case of Africa. About that we will probably discuss later, but with DG NIR we are working closely to implement projects in Ukraine, where we were already active before war, where we started to gain experience, I would say, from more commercial perspective, financing in Polish investments and supporting Polish investors in Ukraine. That was pre-war, and I guess in 2022 Ukraine already was primary market for BGK in financing trade and investments together with the Polish ECA, so the Export Credit Agency. This of course stopped, and the level of, I would say, traditional normal commercial investments has declined to zero. And actually how we see the situation in Ukraine is, I would say we are going step by step. Now it's a question of sustaining the economy. So our actions are rather now targeting instruments which are helping Ukraine economy and Ukrainian entrepreneurs to survive those difficult times. And we are implementing 40 million euro guarantee scheme under the Neighborhood Investment Platform and Ukraine facility. We have signed a top-up agreement with Commission recently under the framework of the Berlin Recovery Conference, where we are working with Ukrainian banks to support their credit action for SMEs, which are operating under very difficult circumstances, so closer to the war zone, so in a more even more unpredictable conditions than those unpredictable general conditions in Ukraine. And in that sense, we want to continue that because we think that, and what we are parallelly doing, we are discussing with potential investors, mainly from Poland, or partnerships, Polish-Ukraine partnerships, because this is more natural and easier for us to discuss. But this is something which will certainly happen in a stage 2. Maybe some single investments can materialize in a short run, but the situation of a business is rather to wait and see how the situation is evolving. Of course, we can help, and I think the instruments which are offered under the Pillar 2 of the Ukraine facility can help entrepreneurs to make risky decisions, de-risking that, but this is not a very simple thing, because the guarantee doesn't solve all the issues, because still the war is there, and the insurance and the property insurance is not in place, and it's not the thing which we can solve very easily in day one or day two. It's rather unsolvable issue of war insurance in a massive numbers. So I think we have to face, and we have to take a very flexible and I would say innovative approach to be ready to finance different operations under very unpredictable times. I would say the priorities are changing now. The priority for Ukraine is clearly the energy sector, especially before the winter time, to replace the destroyed generation which was destroyed in the spring, to do it in a short run. Of course, it won't be probably done in 100%, but the more it's done, the better. We are trying as well to help with the instruments we are implementing together with Ukrainian banks, and Ukraine companies understand they have to invest as well in power generation, because it's not only an issue of saving country, but as well as saving their businesses. Without their energy, they won't run their business. So they see clear economic interest in investing and helping Ukraine economy to strive. And we are ready to support. So what we do in concrete terms, we are trying as well to prepare for the next call, which will be announced soon by the European Commission for the Ukraine facility. But in order to do so, and I think now I come to my general conclusion, what has to be done to strengthen the global gateway, because I think for Ukraine, the framing of global gateway is not used very commonly, but I think this is secondary for that discussions. But what has to be done universally, regardless of the fact it's Ukraine or Africa or Central Asia, from the perspective of the Polish Development Bank, I think it's important first to build Team Poland, as you were, Luke, saying yesterday, under the framework of the discussions in the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think we have to create a better system of cooperation between different agencies which already exist in Poland to better identify potential projects which we could involve, because we are not, I would say, we are not as export-oriented economy as our German or French colleagues. So we see clear a lack of knowledge in terms of identifying where Polish economies, Polish entrepreneurs and investors are going. They're rather conservative in terms of going abroad. They are strong in Poland, they are very strong in the EU, but in terms of going abroad, they are learning how to do. And that's why we have to work together, and we want to work closely with Polish Trade and Investment Agency to better identify those gaps, those needs. And I think we have to better frame, and these discussions we are holding currently with the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Finance, and other relevant institutions, how to better integrate development cooperation into the needs of entrepreneurs and investors. Yeah? And this is not a simple fact, because in Poland we never done that. We are still the country where we're rather thinking that we are recipients of funds. We are not exporters of, we're not the big exporters of capital. So we have to create a system, a better system, to fulfill that gap. Yeah? So I would say first, Team Poland, to implement better global gateway strategies in the areas we identify as important.
Okay, great. Team Poland sounds very good. So we can close now the first round of questions and go directly to the second round. And my next question goes to our guest from the European Commission. And as a Brussels insider, I want to ask you about some technicalities related to global gateway strategy, especially when it comes to selection and implementation of strategy projects. In particular, I want to ask how the flagship projects are they identified, how their strategic value is assessed, and based on which criteria, and what extent the European Commission has managed to involve member states' financial institutions in the field of development into project realization and to mobilize private sector to finance and implement the project. So give us the insight of global gateway strategy.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if it is okay. Okay. Now, yes, this question has many layers that go well beyond what may seem as a bureaucratic process for selection of projects. So I will go through the three main aspects you mentioned, but maybe to look forward as well. And one can talk about the 225 existing list of flagship projects that the Council has endorsed, and I will rather explain the strategic value of one flagship project. Taking an example outside Sub-Saharan Africa and the neighboring region. I would like to take the example of the Sargassum algae regional program in the Caribbean. You know that I don't know if you know about the Sargassum algae, but this constitutes a big threat for the Caribbean states, affecting biodiversity and tourism. And countries and islands in the region are too dispersed to put together a comprehensive approach. So we as Team Europe, because we are not alone in the Commission, we are working with other DGs and member states. We are acting as a convener, working with partners to turn Sargassum from a threat to an economic opportunity. As we can turn Sargassum into cosmetics, fertilizers, biomass, electricity, etc. So how this is done? We provide a structured multi-actor regional approach to support a commercial value chain. This means that on the political side, we bring around the table all the coastal countries. On the industrial side, we have an initial list of EU companies that are ready to engage, that see potential interest in collections and use of Sargassum for energy production or transformation. And in the financial side, we bring together EU member states, European development financial institutions, and all EU financing instruments. And we are not talking only about the instruments for external action, like what we call NDK, but we use internal funds, like funds under the Horizon program or under Interreg. And this is a good example where we have financial institutions, private sector, political actors, and the member states all together trying to solve a specific problem. Zooming out of this, I think, good example, we need to take a critical stance. And I agree with you. There was repackaging of projects. Why? Because before the launch of Global Gateway, we had already a pipeline of projects, so we cannot be rid of the past. So we need to look at the pipeline of projects and see what are the projects that could align with Global Gateway, first. And second, we have indeed too much small projects that are not sufficiently strategic. So being more geostrategic, it will be important for the next generation of projects. We have to focus on a limited number of high-impact projects while keeping an appropriate balance. We do not have to have only projects in the neighborhood region or in sub-Saharan Africa. Central Asia is important, Southeast Asia is important, Latin America and the Caribbean as well. And when we select the flagship project, we need, of course, a core investment in infrastructure. But we have to look as well as soft component as part of the program, so that the program is sustainable in the long run. Now, coming to the involvement of key stakeholders. You have mentioned Team Poland. So, so I'm talking about Team National, okay, of course. So Global Gateway is first and foremost a collective effort. We need a whole of government approach. And the five powers of all the actors in Europe. And indeed, each member state, not only Poland, each member state needs to bring together all the actors and beyond the traditional actors in external action. So we have to put together the public sector and the private sector along the civil society. And there are various avenues to strengthen your involvement in Team Europe. We are always speaking about funding, okay? But Global Gateway does not need only, or it has not only to be linked to financial commitment. There are many viable solutions to be part of Team Europe through non-financial contributions like technical assistance, seconded expert advisors, transfer of know-how, loan of equipment, etc., etc. So we need to have a broad scope of what we can do under Team Europe. As far as the involvement of financial institutions is concerned, your question is of the utmost relevance. A successful implementation of Global Gateway needs member state development banks, member state development institutions, export credit agencies, and the European Investment Bank, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. These are the actors who will really mobilize the investments. And of course, in Brussels, we can build the instrument and the mechanism that could support those actions. When we are rolling out the guarantee schemes called EFSD+, we facilitate those investments by de-risking them. Or when we put together export credit agencies and development financial institutions to see how they can cooperate, we put in place a work strand at European level that is very promising and that should be replicated at national level. And then we have to be clear, really, the responsibility to build up the domestic platform lays with the member state. And this involves, as I said, all the actors, the banks, the financial institutions, the national private sector, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question goes again to Karol Tofil. And because we were discussing the Eastern Partnership, now I want to have a wider look into the world and ask about your bank experiences in developing projects worldwide and your advice also for other development banks, financial institutions about involving this private sector in Global Gateway projects implementation. What would you advise based on your bank's experience?
Thanks, and again, I would recognize what we do in Africa as another baby step, but we can't do a big step at the beginning because we are trying to be ambitious, but not too ambitious. So we are apart from our traditional I would say, activities which I was describing in Ukraine. So similarly, we are trying to finance commercial projects in Africa, but this is extremely difficult on a commercial terms due to the very simple facts that that African counterparts they are not only counting money, but they are, I would say, very oftenly encouraged by very cheap money which originates from China or other destinations in the world, which results then in a situation where the offer of Polish exporters or investors is simply not competitive in terms of price. If you calculate the price of the money accordingly to the risk which comes with that investment, yeah. So that results in a situation where some projects were financed by BGK, and we even last year BGK financed an operation in Rwanda that was a sovereign financing done under to BGK together with KUKE, Polish ECA, financed a contract for the Ministry of Agriculture in Rwanda for food processing. This is a food and grain storage magazines which were delivered by the Polish producers. But this is something which we do, but I don't clearly see a drastic increase because of the facts I mentioned. And here I think we are trying to develop new instruments which would to a certain extent help us to unlock the projects which were undoable in the past. And here again, the enabler is, in that case, EFSD Plus guarantee. We are currently working with the GINTPA, and we are developing, now we are still negotiating the guarantee agreement with the European Commission. We are developing a project to support investments in the digital area in sub-Saharan Africa. And that will be, we hope, an instrument which could succeed on an African market as well, having in mind what we as Poland, as BGK, could offer in the past. Yeah, bringing clearly the development additionality to the projects. And we are simultaneously, of course, because the projects are not easy in Africa, and this is we identify as the main challenge. It's not easy to create a bankable project and a bankable pipeline of projects in Africa, and working with the European Commission under EFSD Plus scheme means that we have to analyze and scrutinize the project as we don't have the EU guarantee, because we have to show and we have to prove that the project is assessed as without the guarantee, because then if it fails, we don't want to be accused of actually granting loans without proper analysis of the business project. So this is what we try to do, and we hope to start implementing our pipeline. We are working currently on 3 projects, one in Rwanda, one in Kenya. These are, I would say, most developed, and as well in DRC, in Senegal. I would say there are projects in the pipeline which, in the digital area, may materialize, I would say, in a mid-term. Of course, having in mind the difficultiness of implementation, I would say this is the main obstacle for us. But again, EFSD Plus is a real enabler from our perspective to go on with that investments. What I would advise, and actually from the Central European peers, I would say, institutions, which we are having discussions because we are networking with them under different organizations, European organizations, which groups development banks from Europe, both who are working domestically and internationally. And in Central Europe, I would say we are the pioneers of that activities. The Czechs are trying to do some steps, but it's only related to Ukraine. But we are discussing as well. That as well with other development banks, and I think here the pillar assessment and the open architecture, I would say, is a big enabler for that banks to participate. Because again. Even in Poland, as I said before, we are the country which doesn't spend enormous amount of money on development cooperation. We don't have, I would say, system of financing financial instruments from the national resources, or this is done in a very limited scale, from a very simple fact that I mentioned, that we were the recipient country of an aid not a very long time ago, and now the economic situation has changed, and the same, I guess, discussion happens in those countries in Central Eastern Europe. Yeah, so the change of the paradigm, I would say, of importer of capital to exporter of capital, and that discussion has to take place. And the open architecture and access to EU finance, I think, is crucial here. And as we are working with the European Commission, I think many of those institutions will slowly start to work, being pillar assessed, which, by the way, maybe not everyone is familiar with that notion. This is pillar assessment is a procedure, I would say an audit, which after positive evaluation means that a financial institution could directly implement EU budget. Yeah? So we could work with the European Commission to directly implement projects under indirect management schemes. So this is now something which I think is done by many of development banks in Central Eastern Europe, mainly because of the fact that there are instruments implemented under this regime for investments inside in their countries, but the audit is basically the same. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you go outside or inside. The Commission is assessing the same procedures. Yeah, so simply the open architecture change a lot, and open architecture means the open access to EFSD+, not limited to EIB or EBRD. But an open call for proposals, as we did 2 years ago for Africa, for the case I mentioned in the digital area. And I think a lot has to be done as well by the colleagues in the European Commission to promote as well that idea of strengthening the development institutions of their financial development institution of the member states, because most of the member states has an institution similar to BGK. Yeah, it's maybe non-existent. No, now even in Romania, I think they have created recently a promotional bank. So now most of the countries has a similar institution. So this has somehow has to be as well promoted by the European Commission, and as well I think it's promoted. The open architecture is promoted, and I think the next MFF should strengthen the possibility to act under this kind of direct projects between bank and European Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I want to touch the topic of Africa, and based on Dominik Skopinski research and experience related to Chinese investment in Africa, I want to ask to what extent global gateway strategy is competitive enough to Chinese offer of cooperation in Africa, and what, if it's not competitive, what European Union can improve?
Thank you. I start with the observation that Global Gateway was launched in December 2021. It's been 3 years, just 3 years, but many things have changed since then, right? Including China-Africa relations. So we are now witnessing a sort of reconfiguration of China-Africa ties, which may be good and bad news for the European Commission and for the European Union in general. So China has clearly first mover advantage over the West in terms of building infrastructure in Africa. The first big project was in the 70s, Tazara Railway linking Zambia to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So since then, but more like since the early 2000s, China has been a prime financier and builder of African infrastructure. We've seen multi-billion projects and kind of the magnitude of those investments that are difficult to ignore. Just to give you a context, if you Google Boston University that database, you'll see that China has extended 1,200 loans to Africa since 2013. Since 2000, and it amounts to around 170 billion US dollars. So that's definitely a number that is impressive. The entire BRI since 2013 is close to 1 trillion US dollars these days. But since around COVID-19, some things have changed, and involvement in infrastructure building by China has been dwindling. Now we've only a handful of kind of medium-sized of loans given recently to African countries. I just returned from Angola and witnessed it first hands. The once kind of very cozy relationship with China is now over, and Angolan government is more than happy to take on board European companies actually turning west as we speak. The example of Lobito Corridor, again linking Angolan coast to Copperbelt in Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo, is a great illustration of this. I wouldn't call it demise, but kind of the honeymoon is over thing in terms of China in Africa. Trafigura, this is a consortium of European companies, got the contract from Angolan government, and the China actually was not happy about that. By the way, this is also a question of communication. We discussed it before, that if you talk about Lobito Corridor in Africa, most people would say that this is American-funded project. But now we hear that this is European Union-funded project. So I'm not accusing American friends of disinformation, but it's something of misinformation, probably, or perhaps making communication more effective and who's doing what, because we know that this is a composition of 300 different small projects, so that's maybe a confusing thing. And one of the reasons why China has been less active in Africa these days, it realized that it got financially overexposed in the region, and now, as some of you may know, is forced to extend rescue loans to many African countries that are unable to pay the debt to the Chinese creditor, countries such as Zambia, Ghana, Ethiopia probably is next in line to be defaulting on Chinese debt, essentially. So after some rethinking on the Chinese part, there's been a notable shift more recently and BRI project is being now kind of repackaged into, they call it small and beautiful, kind of boutique approach or smart projects. Instead of this grandiose and spectacular, projects, multi-billion types. Also because of the quality issues in many countries and the debt issue in terms of Africa exposition to China, the reputation of China has taken a serious hit in many countries. So now governments across the region feel that too many loans from China is not necessarily a good idea. So what I'm saying here is that given all this in pure financial terms, this makes the EU ambitions more than welcome, and this is the situation where the China is stepping back a little bit, and the EU can step in more ambitious ways. Now the bad news, because I also mentioned there is some bad news, the bad news is that BRI is also reimagined as we speak in China, and now there are more green technologies, digital technologies, smart selective projects. It's not just the quantity of projects as in the past. So in that sense, now in 2024, Global Gateway may not be as original as we thought it would be in 2021. Another thing is that because of the nature of the Chinese regime, Beijing may still be more effective in coordinating and mobilizing both finance and private companies, but also state-owned capital in China. And the EU, just because this is EU, not China, is not able to pull all the strings so effectively as the Beijing does. For example, to make private capital go to Africa. It can incentivize firms to go to Africa, but there are certain limits to the magnitude of private investment in Africa, also because of the thing that I mentioned, being this cautious or kind of prudent approach of many European firms regarding the difficult business climate in Africa and all these risks involved in going to the region. Also, this complex web on Team Europe is definitely a good idea, but it's still a complex web of different actors, right? From multilaterals to banks, financial institutions, and let alone member countries. So this perhaps is something that is not going to make it much easier for the European Union. And on the last note. I think this is also important that China can move faster. This is what the evidence shows in Africa, that it can be really fast and effective. If you talk to the Chinese scholars, they say that, well, there is a lot of bureaucracy in China. Sure, that's a given. But if you compare it to European bureaucracy, I think the system works more effectively, so to speak. So it is very important for the EU not to overburden African countries with this complex and costly bureaucratic procedures. Because, as I said, there is still perception in Africa, in many places, that China delivers fast results, and the EU, drags its feet. Also because of the principles and the value-based approach, which takes time. And this is the fair kind of point, that if you assess human rights record or do a proper environmental impact, you need to take time to do it right. So this may be paradoxically something that makes the whole process a little bit less swift than in the case of China. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question goes to Ella, and I want to ask a question about the perception of the global gateway strategy in the context of disinformation, because we know that the launch of this strategy was a change in EU narrative on its financial assistance worldwide. And what are, in your opinion, difficulties in promoting a strategy narrative in light of disinformation campaigns that we are actually observing everywhere now, but mainly I would say from the perception of the project, let's say in Africa, in Eastern neighborhood.
Sure. Being at the same time panelist and organized, I feel this time pressure now. But basically, there are two layers related to the problem of communication of EU aid. The first one, what Mr. Dominik Kopinski touched upon, is that usually the European Commission is implementing the aid globally through intermediaries. Various one, the financial organizations, other international organizations, and is also cooperating with other big donors like Americans. And at the end of the day, the recognition of the EU role, is low. That somehow, this is eaten cake for the EU itself, and we can see like the data before the launch of the global gateway. Usually, the investment in infrastructure attracts people attention. But what happens on the case on an example of the closest neighborhood in 2020, the data of public opinion were such that only 13% of the inhabitants of southern neighborhood countries reported that they saw tangible benefits in the field of infrastructure supported by the EU. And if it comes to the Eastern Partnership region, only 20% of the citizens declared knowledge of any projects in infrastructure. And it is not the case that EU is not active over there, because it's active for many years. The problem is, somehow that you have like EBRD, EIB, member states, development banks, etc. This is only one problem which is quite easy maybe to solve with better branding. And there are some new efforts to do communication campaign on global gateways. So this is a work to be done. But the second more important problem is the vast disinformation campaigns led by Russia, which are, exploring this anti-Western, anti-colonial sentiments in various regions of the world, mainly in Africa, but also in the other regions, and they are quite they meet a fertile ground, I advise you to read a report of Sara Nowacka and Jędrzej Czerep on Africa, where they have analyzed the Russian narratives, including also the EU. The new report will be on Latin America. Which Bartek Znojek is working. So we are looking, and different on different Russian narratives promoted worldwide. And what we see, that the Russian disinformation campaigns are really very well targeted. That Russian operates like through various channels, not only on social media, but also through some local organizations, some chambers of commerce, through their consulates, etc. And this is a problem, because they are building a very negative image of the EU, which is, the disinformation uses very well explores the emotions of people, and it's really difficult to counter for EU officials, such messages. On the example of recent disinformation campaigns on sanctions, I can see that, the EU sanctions and EU engagement in war in Ukraine, the disinformation campaigns point that they blame sanctions for all the misfortunes of global South, for food crisis, for economic problems, And then it is very important. It's really difficult to build a positive narrative of the EU in global South, but also in closest neighborhood. And I mean, what can be done? It's like just to try to reach first to analyze better maybe different disinformation narratives, not only in closest neighborhood, but also in different regions, in Africa, in Latin America, and then try, to reach local populations, but also through NGOs, and do some campaigns, but locally. And what I see, it is important, that national parliamentarians and national politicians do a positive message of EU role. So you can explore more high-level visits in this respect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have not 8 minutes, I think, left to the end of our panel. I want to ask the audience to answer questions. Please raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and I think that we'll collect some questions, if there are any, and combine answering the questions with your final remarks. So, please raise your hand if you want to ask. We have.
Alexandra Kozioł, Polish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much for the discussion. I think that we went around the circle in terms of that we started with China and we ended up on disinformation and Russian and Chinese activities. And I'm not an economy expert, I deal with security. But anyway, as I heard about disinformation, I have this sort of feeling that we blame a lot Russia and China. And it's definitely not to underestimate their actions, but being inspired by the slogan of Team Poland, I wanted to ask what we can do practically to promote Team Europe, because I still feel that, Global Gateway started 3 years ago, but EU is investing for years globally. And still I have this notion that we are not visible enough, whereas China is clearly visible. I'm not dealing with economy, but I do hear this sort of narrative that they're globally not only present, but also willing to cooperate with diverse partners globally. And what can we do to be a Team Europe player? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, so my name is Tomasz Zając, PISM. You covered the private funding extensively, and I was thinking, what about the third sector? So the NGOs, Ella just mentioned that. So what is the role for those kind of organization? May they play some role? Is it important, or it's negligible? So yeah, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so I think we'll finish with 2 questions. And I don't know if we have any volunteer here who'd like to answer our 2 questions first. But if not, maybe I will ask Luke Bagur to start. And as I mentioned, you can also add something at the end as a final conclusion from your side.
Okay, thank you. So I start with the last question, maybe about NGOs. I think that where we talk about Global Gateway projects or flagships, we are not talking only about hard infrastructure. We are talking about a 360-degree approach where we have soft component. Under the Lobito corridor that had been mentioned, there are more than 300 different projects. Again, those are big projects, the 300 projects, but we have sub-projects within this project where NGOs can be involved. When we are talking about vocational training, for instance, in a specific country to allow specific investment, NGOs can have a role as implementers. But beyond that, NGOs have a role as watchdog. It's important for the Commission to engage with NGOs in Brussels, of course, and we have a specific platform for that, but locally. And we have asked our delegations to set up a roadmap for engagement with NGOs and to support the capacity building of NGOs and the platforms so that they can really be part of the policy design, be part of the programming discussions and be part of the project designs, and even being part, in certain cases, of steering committee, board, working group, where we look at the implementation of the projects. And finally, they can be the voice of the local communities. And this is important, as we say that Global Gateway is a race-based approach, and we talk about the time we take to design a project, but because we do feasibility study, we look at the social impact, we look at the environmental impact. We do not decide, okay, to invest billions or hundreds of millions without knowing exactly what will be the impact on the communities. And so those principles and values are important, and NGOs have their place in this world setup. Coming to Team Europe, there are various avenues. Of course, we can intensify our campaign. When we do a campaign about Global Gateway, and we talk to the youth in Latin America, when we do a campaign in Kazakhstan or in Central Asia about renewable energy or green hydrogen, we are talking about Team Europe. Okay, so we are not anymore talking about European Commission as such, but about Europe. So this is the first avenue. But we have just starting. Okay, so we cannot see an audit or an evaluation will not bring a lot, because it's only the beginning of a process. Second, we have to coordinate more on the spot. I think that normally there is cooperation between the missions of the member states and the European Commission, etc., but we can do more. And to build Team Europe concretely on the spot. This should not be something theoretical, no, this should be a reality. So when we dialogue with a partner country, we should dialogue as a team, okay? And then the third point, for me, would be joint mission at political level. So that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland travel with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, with the Commissioner as a team, and show to the partner country, that at political level, we can bring something to the partner. And to conclude on this, I think that indeed we need to announce Team Europe coordination and to be more strategic. And we need to go even further than a national wall of a government approach. Global Gateway need a wall of country approach. And the Commission has to deliver, but my message will be that the member states also need to deliver a clear message to partner countries, international partners and business that Global Gateway is and will remain our core strategy for action. So I am in Poland. We count on Polish government, Polish think tanks, Polish civil society, as well as the domestic private sector to implement Global Gateway in a Team Europe approach. And the Commission is there not to control, but to support. And so it was a pleasure to be here with you and to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are also honored to have you here today, and thank you for your contribution. Our other panelists, final remarks?
There is this difficult word that I always struggle with. I think this, the pronunciation is ventriloquist, and this is the French word as well. Ventriloquist, right? Ventriloquist. Yeah. So the person that speaks with a kind of, in Poland is a belly speaker. You speak without opening your mouth, right? So what I'm saying that is that I have two hopes. One is that the European Union really fixes its image in Africa, and it's going to be a really kind of request-driven approach in a proper sense. It's not going to be ventriloquist when the European Union says it doesn't speak, but it requires or expects certain things to happen. Right? This is an old dilemma in development aid that there are certain conditions that you have, and if you don't speak, it doesn't mean that you don't expect countries to deliver on certain things. And since all these principles and values of the European Union, which are good, I think this is something that makes the entire project more complicated. And the other hope is that Team Poland becomes an integral part of Team Europe. But I'm not a diplomat, so I can speak more bluntly using some crude words, and I think it requires some serious political mobilization on the part of Poland, and starting with the Africa strategy would be nice, because we still don't have this document. Thank you.
Thanks. Very shortly, I will conclude on Team Europe notion from our perspective, and I think it's not from the financial institution perspective. We don't treat it as an empty name, because for us, going abroad to a risky country, Team Europe creates more reassurances for us than we actually can succeed, and we can successfully implement projects, because we can share the risks with other colleagues and other financial institutions. We can work with them, we can learn from their experience how to implement difficult projects in more risky environment. So from our perspective, Team Europe is something which may be attractive, and we hope it will be attractive.
I have a very short conclusion from this discussion. I think if it comes to some operational conclusions for the future of Global Gateway, this is to be more strategic and to pick up some high-level projects attractive for partners, and to have Global Gateway better communicated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we can finally say the last words, and at the end I want to say thank you to all the panelists for their contribution, and also special thanks to Elżbieta Kaca for organizing this seminar. And on behalf of my institute and organizers, now I want to invite you for a lunch break, and maybe during the lunch break we'll still continue discussions about this topic. I enhance you to do so, to use the opportunity to network also and exchange your experiences and knowledge. Thank you again, and follow also our publications about disinformation, about Global Gateway. So yes, try to visit our website. We are all the time up to date as an institute. So thank you very much again, and see you on our next meetings and events.
Thank you.